Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We can talk about whatever you want.
Yeah, no. Let's continue. So I would say that the running for public office in Urbana for me, a Latino immigrant from Chile, is kind of like the farthest thing from my mind that I ever had. Like, it's not something that when I grew up I said, when I grow up I want to run for school board in Champaign, in Urbana. But living in a community like Urbana makes you a little bit of an activist. And as we discussed in the last visit, I've learned a lot, and I've learned a lot about the social issues in the U.S. And I learned mostly from my friends, from the people that I met who have educated me, on all of these social issues that I was simply not aware. I was not aware because of my bringing of privilege in Chile, by the fact that I did not grow up in this country, and maybe because I feel that I have a debt that to repay to this community for being so welcoming, I felt that I had to, put myself out there to be the face of a movement. Yeah. And in reality, I'm just the voice or the front for all of my supporters in the community, all of the people who I'm representing. So I'm basically the front and probably the person with thick skin to be the voice of our community, for the progressive voice of our community. Something that has been wonderful about this is that I met. This is a really crazy enterprise. I had a lot of support from my partner and from my kids, and I have the fortune to feel all of the support and the love from my friends. And I've also met a lot of new friends.
Oh, that's good.
And it has been personally something very demanding, daunting at times, but wonderful. It's something that so far, I don't regret anything of this. It has been a crazy and wonderful experience to run for public office in a small village in the Midwest.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, you yourself are an academic, correct?
That's right.
So you've spent the bulk of your life studying in some way in schools. Does that give you a sort of an understanding of the educational system that maybe somebody down the street wouldn't have, or does that not really factor into this at all, do you think?
Well, I think that probably not in terms of education, because the way in which education is done in higher education is very different how it's done in regular school districts. But being a scientist and always, so as a scientist, you are always working kind of like in the fog. You're like at the edge. You're at the edge of something, and you don't know what's coming next. Yeah. So it's always uncharted territory, and you need to learn to be comfortable with that as a scientist, and not to get lost in the fact that nothing is charted. Yeah. That you reach a point, and then you go in one direction, and then you get lost, and then you come back. So you always have to be comfortable in that. So as a scientist, you're used to that. As an investigator, as a researcher, the other thing that you're used to working with people that have very strong opinion and gigantic egos.
Really? No kidding. I would never have guessed that.
So you need to learn how to convince people with arguments and not by bullying them. You need to learn to, and also gain their trust. And you need to figure out the way how they're going to trust your judgment. Yeah. So that's something that you need to do if you are an elected official, and you're going to work with other people. So that's actually what being an academic prepares you. Now, the other thing that is interesting is when we talk about social issues, when we talk about the changing of society in the 21st century, which is amazing.
Oh, yeah.
And is rapidly changing. The issues become complicated when you don't really know the path forward. So in that sense, it's kind of like science, right? So, today, in the year of 2019, the same-sex marriage is, it's an easy bet. Everybody rallies behind that, right? It's mainstream.
Ish. There's still a fairly strong constituency pushing back against that.
But it's not. There's no risk.
It's no longer like a crazy idea.
Exactly. There's no risk. Okay. But all of the important social changes started like crazy ideas. And it's up to, and in that sense, trying to find that path in the obscurity of what is the right side of history and social changes is the same as you do it in science. You don't know where you're heading.
Right.
And you need to be brave and trust yourself and actually do your research and understand why a path is the one that we need to follow. There's this, what we like to believe is like the arc of history, the arc of justice that we want to follow. But that arc is not charted. We follow our hearts, our moral compasses as human of why we're doing this. And I think that is the compass that we need to follow. But it's not clear. And when these issues are not clear, is when they become hot topics. And that's why I would say this election has become contested and has become important, because today we are finally awakening as America to the social injustices that we're seeing. Finally, this is not just a cry from a fringe of the society.
Right.
We are hearing it. We're hearing it in mainstream media, and it's becoming evident. And it's so evident that Kerry and I can run with that platform. But still, it's not something that everybody's convinced. So what I'm most happy about this election is that we are discussing these topics. Yeah. These topics are what we're talking about. We are in Urbana in 2019, and the reason why we're running is because we are fighting. We're fighting for racial inequality. We need to challenge the structures that have been, oppressing.
Yeah, yeah.
Of oppression.
Well, I get what you're saying, and I think that's a really interesting point, because in the past, a lot of these questions, particularly about social justice, racial justice, and things like that, have been based around whether or not there was a problem. Does racism really exist? And you find that not that long ago, you could go back and find a lot of important people saying racism was in the past. But now there's such a big fracture that now it's not so much people talking about whether there's a problem, but what the parameters of that problem are, and trying to figure out what side they fall on these questions, rather than, oh, there's no problem at all. It's post-racial. We don't, we've moved on to other things. And now it's like, yeah, there's a really big problem here. I'm not sure where I sit or where I stand on that. So this is a time when it's important, I think, to take a stand and say, okay, I've already thought about this. This may be news to you, but to me, I've dealt with this for years, and I know exactly where I stand, and it's right here. And that, I think having confident voices that are able to say that and say, this is what I believe is right, and here's why, and am willing to back that up and stand behind that, is really important for making other people comfortable in following their inclination. That, I guess that seems right to me, but I'm not sure. It's like, okay, well, he seems pretty confident. So people like to line up kind of behind those that are really sure of what they're saying. And that's not always a good thing, obviously. But I think it's a really good time to be a voice, a confident voice for certain aspects of social justice. This is the time to do that. And I think it's great that you're doing that, even in something like the school board, which one doesn't normally associate with these larger social questions. But in fact, school is where a lot of these things are happening. These kids are experiencing this stuff real time in their lives, and they're trying to figure it out for themselves. It's like, whoa, what am I? Where do I fit into this place? How does this all work? And that's really where it all begins, and that's where those questions should be less questions and more directions. Exactly. You know what I mean?
No, I completely see your point. So when my journey, when we started this campaign, I first wanted to bring to the attention the fact that we have a dysfunctional board, a board that lacks transparency, that is ineffective, that it doesn't really represent our values. Then I wanted to point out that they don't have a platform. Thankfully now they do have, some of the members have a platform, and we don't have any fundamental differences. There's no fundamental ideological differences. That's actually fantastic.
Yeah.
Then I wanted to point out that I went on pointing out that they were not doing their job at developing and enacting policy, at engaging with the community and figuring out what was the best methods to solve our problems. So I've already stressed that. I've talked about that. I think that right now, what I, in the last week of the campaign is, I want to talk to Urbana, right? It's like, by this time, most people have made their mind who they're going to vote. We're not in the process of changing their minds of who they're going to vote. But I think this is the time to talk to Urbana and ask our, we are very proud of who we are. We are, many of us, we pay higher taxes with pride because we understand that it's probably for a good reason, because we're providing services, because we understand that we're a community.
Yeah.
So we're a special village in the Midwest. And this is a time for Urbana to wake up, or maybe for a part of Urbana to wake up, to examine our soul as a community. We are at a crossroads, and to figure out where do we want to go, regardless of the outcome of the election. I hope that we use this, this as an impetus to have these conversations, to say where do we want to focus our energy, what are we going to do to desegregate our schools, to desegregate our cities, to make sure that we have more mixed communities. We still have, Urbana is highly segregated. The level of, and also Urbana is very poor. We need to wake up to this reality. So Urbana is about 18 point higher, has poverty that is about 18 point higher than similar communities like Normal, like Lafayette. It's even poorer than Champaign. So we need to wake up to that reality, and we don't need to panic, but we need to do something about it. And we need to use the combined privilege that many of us have, the education that many people have who are artists, who are academics who work at the university, who are activists, community members. We all have these resources, and I think that if we decide that this is a problem, we wake up to the fact that this is a problem that is not unsolvable. It's tough, but I think we can do something, and we pull all our energy together. We might make a dent. We might push forward, and I think we should all feel very proud that then we can become an example of how to solve this without any directive from Washington or from Springfield. We can do it because we as a community look ourselves and decided, regardless of who gets elected on April 2nd, we decided this is the course that we want to follow. We have woken up. We have seen these structures of segregation, this strike of white oppression that have been affecting not only Urbana but the rest of the country, and we have decided to do something about it. I hope that that's my greatest desire for this election, and that's, if you ask me, that's the reason why I'm running. Winning will be a fantastic after effect. But the fact that we could finally get the community talking about this, and when I talk about the community, I'm talking about the students, I'm talking about the teachers. Many of the teachers who work in our district, they live in Urbana. I'm talking about the parents and the people who are retired, who don't have kids, but they still, they're still paying their taxes, and they stay in our community. You see a lot of retired people who stay in Urbana. They don't go to the Sun Belt. They stay here because the quality of life is fantastic. It's intellectually engaging. So people decided to stay here.
Have there been any events in the schools? I've been only tangentially aware of what goes on because I don't have kids, and I'm not. I just have a lot going on. It seems to me some things have been going on in Urbana recently. Are these involved in some way with your campaign, or was this after you already started your campaign and it's just proof of what you've been saying? Or,
right. So you could say that one of the main reasons why this is all boiling up is that the Urbana School District decided a couple of years ago to change the methods in which discipline is done.
Okay.
And they went from a strictly punitive method to something that is called restorative practices or restorative justices.
Yeah.
And that is, so following that directive, I've said this many times, is not a matter of opinion. It's actually guidance that we have received from the Department of Education, from the state of Illinois. And they're very clear guidance that we have received in order to avoid the number of suspensions and expulsions, in order to keep the kids in school longer, and as a way of stopping or clogging somehow the school to prison pipeline.
Okay, so I'll interrupt you just briefly. So in the past, I'm a kid, I get in trouble for something, I do something, I would just be either expelled or
suspended. First suspended, then
then expelled. Now, what happens to me if I, let's say, get in a fight or
right? So what Urbana, the school district, decided to follow was the idea of restorative praxis, which is not, many people who did not like the approach, they said that it's not discipline and there are no consequences. But in reality, there are consequences, and expulsions, suspensions, they're still available. They're still part of the toolkit. I would say that the intent of the spirit of discipline is different. It's actually at restoring harm rather than applying a punishment. So the idea of restorative practices is more holistic, and it's not just about discipline. It's a very complex method of mostly of behavior and how you carry yourself in life, and it takes years to be implemented. And years ago, I don't know exactly, I think probably about 3 or 4 years ago, the community started talking about this, and I think that there was enough buy-in. And again, this was mostly pushed by the administration and not by the board. Urbana School District decided to start implementing this and start moving away from, there's still suspensions and expulsion, but they tried to move away from this. And one of the things that happened at this time was that the school district decided to remove the deans. And the deans is kind of like one layer of discipline that happens between the teachers, between the students and the teachers. So it's a resource that the teachers have to maintain discipline. And some of these deans were in charge of keeping the discipline in the halls and across the school. And this was the same in the middle school and in the high school. But there was clear evidence that the number of suspensions for African American kids and in general for students of color was highly biased towards them. So a solution needed to happen, and the deans were removed, and everybody in the community liked that decision. Actually, many people in the community disliked that decision. Many of the teachers disliked that decision. I'm not sure if I agree on how it was done, the implementation, and that led to discipline issues last fall. So this happened over the summer, and then last fall were discipline issues, and there was a serious uptick of problems of violence, of fights, particularly I think in the middle school and the high school. So that upset a lot of the parents.
Sure.
But what is interesting is that you hear this in the public hearings, and you hear this on and on again from parents, particularly white parents. They go and say, "This is not about color; this is about discipline." Right. But then you go and hear, and let me be clear, I think that everybody should be safe at school. Right. Yes. So I'm not saying that we should compromise on safety, but then we were led to believe that we needed to choose between social justice or discipline. They kind of make them incompatible, and they're not incompatible. I think we should do both. We need to provide safety for the teachers. We need to provide an environment that is conducive of learning, but at the same time, we need to keep pushing to change the structure. So that create concerns of safety from the parents, and you could see in the public comments how actually you rarely hear a parent who is African American complaining about the removal of deans. It's really, the views are completely segregated. So and that tells you that our community, it is divided, and it is divided on, again, in what is best for our kids.
Yeah. So when you fail to address the causes of problems, then your only response can be, well, not your only. The answer is always trying to decide what the best response to the problems is. And so I can see this just mirrors the country as a whole.
Exactly.
With we need more police. We need longer jail terms. You get these people who are just like convinced that the solution to crime is more punishment for criminals. Not how does someone become a criminal, not how do you decide who is a criminal and who isn't. None of those things. Disparities in sentencing, all those things are ignored. Those are the problems that it's just too hard to figure out. So we just have a simple question before us. What do we do about this? Do we lock them up or do we play nice? That seems to be the same thing playing out in this microcosm of Urbana that in the nation.
And I think that we could do better. I think that we could do both. We could provide safe school with a discipline system that closes the racial gap in discipline. I think it's possible to do both. We should not be afraid of our students. Now, and then something else that we should not ignore, and we need to talk about this, is that the fights and the discipline issues that we see in our community are just a symptom. It's like the fever is not the illness.
Right.
So what we're seeing is that we're seeing the poverty, and we know that violence and crime is associated with poverty. People don't decide to go in a life of crime. It's completely associated with poverty of neighborhoods. We know that this is not news to anyone. It should have. So we're seeing the problems of our community that some people don't want to maybe face. We're seeing them also percolating in our schools.
Right.
And we need to do something about it. And we need to do something that tries to help all the students.
Right.
I don't think we should be focusing on getting more Chromebooks and more screen time for our kids. I think we need to be focusing on making sure that we address, that we catch the kids. We need to start earlier. Probably by middle school it's too late. One of the reasons why suddenly we wake up to this, we face this issue, we kind of like acknowledge them, is when we go to middle school, and where everybody now is in the same school. Before, when our kids go to their neighborhoods, primary schools, there's a sheltering that comes from the neighborhood, primarily from the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you just wake up to the harsh reality in middle school that you need to then mix with everybody in your town. And before that, actually, they were segregated.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's part of it. And we're not talking about that. We should.
Well, it's an important point, because when starting at middle school and up into high school, you have the norm, whatever the norm is decided by the community. This is the way everyone's supposed to behave. But everyone didn't behave that way prior to this. They adapted to their particular environment, and they had their own rules and social rules. I mean, that fit their, what am I trying to say? Their specific little community. And then they get to a place where everybody's mixed together, and suddenly everyone is supposed to follow a certain set of rules that some people had been following since birth because of their community, and others have not had to do, or were not even given the opportunity to do. So that's why I think it's important for people to realize that how you get to a place tells you everything about your trajectory going forward. And then what you do about it should be different depending on which way where someone's coming from. You have to redirect them in different ways, and they don't all work. It's not one size fits all.
No. And their methods. And Urbana, most days are hopeful and optimistic. I mean, Urbana has been visionary in doing this. And again, it has been visionary. All this vision has again come from the administration, not from the board. So in Urbana, we have addressed the issue of immigrant communities fantastically through the dual language programs. So my kids go to the dual language program, and the dual language program in Urbana started in Spanish, and it started at the Leal Elementary School, And then it also opened again in Dr. Williams, which is another of the primary schools. And the idea of the dual language program is using language as a tool to integrate immigrant communities. And we're not talking about the immigrant communities of academics that are coming to the U of I. We're talking about poor immigrants that are escaping. They're escaping violence in Central America. They're escaping poverty, and they're coming here in search of opportunity, and they don't speak English.
Yeah.
So Urbana has done fantastically, and the dual language has been a success despite the initial reticence of the board. So we have already been very bold at doing this, and it's worked. Now there's a dual language program in French, which is trying to do the same, but integrating a Congolese community that we have in Urbana. I mean, who would believe that we're going to have people from, so many people from Central America in the Midwest, and also now from Central West Africa. But Urbana is doing it. Is doing it well, and these experiments have worked largely very, very well. Now we need to look at ourselves and say, what are we going to do now to integrate the communities with the kids who were born here, but in the other side of town? How are we going to integrate that? Well, that's what a board should be doing. It should be engaging the rest of the community in these conversations and figuring out how we're going to do to get safer and more racially integrated and economically integrated schools at all levels.
Yeah. We're nearing the end of our hour here.
And again, time flew by.
Yeah. So I want to make sure that we get these points out there. First, the forum is on Thursday, correct? That's the 28th at the Unitarian Church in Urbana.
That's right.
The one on Green Street?
The one on Green Street.
Yeah. The election is the 4th?
It's Tuesday, April 2nd.
Second.
And you should go and vote in Champaign.
Yeah, I will.
I can give you some tips on who you should vote in Champaign too.
It's sort of easy. Well, I won't say. I'll say that. I'll wait till after the show. Because I don't want to offend anybody. But, yeah. So you've got 2 or 3 minutes. Wrap it up for us.
So what do I want to do? I would really want to thank my friends in Urbana.
Yeah.
Hopefully many of them are at home writing postcards. And I'm gonna head there pretty soon. I feel extremely fortunate to be here as an immigrant and be the face of a movement. And I have to say that all of the campaign, all of the advice, it's done by very strong, mostly Midwestern women who know how to do this shit excellently. And I'm in constant admiration of them.
Yeah.
So that's what I want to say.
That sounds great. Well, once again, we've run out of time here at the CU Immigration Show here on WRFU LP Urbana 104.5 FM. I would like to thank my guest, who you will hopefully be soon I can't talk, who will hopefully be the next school board member, one of 2 new school board members who will be elected next Tuesday. I'm not telling you who to vote for, but if you watch this show or listen to it and you can't figure that out by now, then I'm sorry, you weren't paying attention. But I really appreciate your coming on and talking to us, and I hope you'll come back again sometime. There's probably more to talk about.
Absolutely.
In the meantime, I hope you, the listener, will tune in again, and we will see you some other time. Thanks, bye.